The first time she saw him, snow was falling heavy over the mountains, and the land looked like a ghost wrapped in white. He stood in the distance, broad as the cabin logs themselves, his silver braid catching the faint light like a streak of frozen fire. The villagers called him the Giant Apache, a man carved by time, war, and wilderness. They said his heart had long gone to stone, that he was too old for dreams and too scarred for love. But Eliza did not see a stone. She saw a man who had carried the weight of 1,000 storms and still walked upright. She had been sent west to marry another, some farmer with land, some man who needed strong hands more than a tender soul. Yet fate twisted in ways no one could predict. Her wagon broke outside the mountains, and in her desperation, she found his cabin, smoke curling from the chimney like a lonely signal to the world. When he opened the door, she nearly stepped back from the sight. He was massive, his chest bare against the cruel winter, skin marked with scars of old battles. His voice, when it came, was rough stone scraping across silence. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "The world's too cruel for someone like you." Eliza trembled but did not leave. Something in his eyes, dark and endless, held her still. She whispered that she had nowhere else to go. He let her inside. Days turned into weeks. She helped him with the cabin, carrying wood, cooking simple meals, mending torn cloth with delicate stitches. He rarely spoke, except to give short instructions or warnings about the wilderness. He was distant, almost cold. Yet in his silence she found a strange comfort. It was not the silence of neglect but of a man who had locked his heart away for too long. The villagers in town whispered about him. "The Giant Apache is too old for love," they said. "He is a relic, a ghost of war. He walks this land only to wait for death." They told her to leave, that no good could come from lingering near a man like him. But Eliza could not. Because in the quiet moments, when he thought no one watched, she saw his humanity. She saw the way his hands lingered over a small carving he had made long ago, the way his eyes softened at the sight of snow falling against the window, the way his steps grew slower as if weighed down by years of memories. One night, when the wind howled against the walls and the fire burned low, he finally spoke more than a handful of words. "I'm too old for love," he said. His voice carried the heaviness of finality, as though he carved the words into the walls of the cabin itself. Her heart squeezed, but she did not turn away. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as she reached for him. He did not move, but his breath caught, like a man who had forgotten the nearness of touch. "I've waited my whole life for you," she whispered. The words cracked through him like thunder. For a long time he said nothing, only stared into the flames as though the fire might give him an answer. His hands, large and scarred, clenched and unclenched at his sides. That night something shifted. He did not kiss her, nor did he embrace her. But he allowed himself to look at her, really look, with the eyes of a man who had forgotten how. The days grew softer after that. He showed her the trails in the mountains, teaching her where the deer moved and where the wolves hunted. He told her of his past, not all at once, but in fragments. How he had once fought battles he no longer believed in. How he had loved once, long ago, but buried it when death came too close. How he built this cabin to keep the world out, only to find that loneliness was a crueler enemy than any soldier. Eliza listened to every word, her heart aching for the years he had lost. Yet she also saw the man who remained, the strength, the resilience, the quiet dignity. She did not see him as too old. She saw him as timeless. The villagers noticed her absence from town, and rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she had been bewitched. Others said she was foolish, throwing her life away on a man who would never give her love. But they did not hear what she heard in the silence between them. They did not feel the way his gaze softened when she brushed snow from her hair, or the way his rough voice grew gentle when he called her name. Spring thawed the snow, and with it, thawed the man himself. One evening, as the last of the winter ice melted from the eaves of the cabin, he stood before her, his massive frame trembling like a mountain in the wind. You don't know what you're saying, he told her. You're young. The world still waits for you. I've lived my battles. I've buried my dreams. My hands are too scarred to hold someone soft like you. Her answer came not with words but with the brush of her hand against his chest, her fingers tracing the scars as though they were not marks of ruin but stories of survival. You are wrong, she whispered. I waited my whole life, not for someone untouched, but for someone who has lived, endured, and still stands. For you. His breath shook, and for the first time in decades, tears filled his eyes. He did not push her away. Instead, he pulled her close, his arms enveloping her like a fortress against the world. The giant Apache, who had declared himself too old for love, finally let the walls fall. He kissed her, not with the urgency of youth, but with the deep, enduring strength of a man who knew the worth of what he held. From that night on, the villagers' whispers changed. Some still scoffed, saying it was madness. But others, seeing them together, began to believe in second chances, in love that came not in the spring of life but in the autumn, richer, deeper, unshaken by passing storms. The cabin that once stood silent became filled with laughter, with the warmth of meals shared by firelight, with the quiet rhythm of two souls who had finally found one another. And when the snow fell again, blanketing the world in silence, the man who once called himself too old for love stood at the doorway with his braids silver as the frost, his arm around the woman who had waited her whole life. He no longer said he was too old. He no longer believed love had passed him by. For love had come to him at last, not as a fleeting flame, but as a fire that would burn steady until the end of his days.